hardwood floors, echoes of our family lore. Grandpa's jump shot, dad's fast break, our legacy will never shake. Keys to the gym, unlocking our hearts.
All right, basketball fans, we are back from the hardwood. This is John Montana and Sophie Montana with episode 1 of Keys to the Gym. Just want to take a couple of moments to sort of set the expectations for our agenda for today. We're going to take the first 5 to 10 minutes and just share some personal background and experiences. We'll talk about some first memorable moments as it relates to the game of basketball. Going to talk with Soph a little bit about some of her early experiences, share a little bit about our background, a little bit about my coaching philosophy and experiences that I have. But we're actually going to also spend a bunch of time. A key segment for our podcast each week is always going to be about game of the week. And we can't think of a better time to launch our first episode. Today, we had the opportunity to watch the U.S. women's national team win another gold medal in thrilling fashion against France. So we'll dive into that. We'll get Sophie's feedback, and then we'll talk a little bit about opportunities for listener engagement as we go forward. So without further ado, we're going to just dive in. The goal of this podcast is really about democratizing the game. And so our plans for this over the long term are going to be all about generating resources, experiences, and insights that can help a wide range of basketball enthusiasts, young players, experienced players. We're going to highlight players from across the country. We're going to talk about the game of basketball at all levels, and hopefully really contribute in some way to growing the game of basketball for women around the globe. So that's what we're really after. I'm excited that my co-host for this endeavor is none other than Sophie Montana. We'll learn a little bit more about her as we go along. But what's really neat is Sophie represents the third generation of Montanas in the game of basketball. Fortunate to have grown up in a household with a father who we affectionately call Pops today, father who coached at the collegiate level, and so exciting. But also this idea, just share with you a little bit about where the name comes from. Keys to the Gym. For 3 generations now, we have had wonderful opportunities to be in and around the game. As I mentioned, my father was a college coach for many, many years. I had my mother was a PE teacher. And then fast forward to myself and my better half, we both had the opportunity to play collegiately, and then both have had the opportunity to contribute to coaching at the high school and club levels, even today. So excited to be able to provide same opportunities that I was provided growing up, and that is access to courts, access to great coaching, access to all the special things that the game of basketball has afforded me and afforded my wife, and now affords to our children and the communities that we get to be a part of. So Keys to the Gym is all about access, and we want to make sure that we're generating resources and opportunities for other young people who want to have those same positive experiences. So that's a little bit about where the name comes from and what the history is, and we're going to share more of those stories as well as we go along. But that's the goal. So we're gonna transition right in here, and I first question that I kind of put out to Sophie was, let's each share sort of one of our first more memorable experiences from the game of basketball. I don't know if anybody has seen the interview that Sue Bird did with Caitlin Clark back in the spring, and Caitlin Clark was sharing a story about how her father would not allow her to shoot from the 3-point line. Her father was her first coach, and she has older brothers. And she talked about how her dad wouldn't allow her to shoot 3-pointers until she really had mastered her form. And so, first few years that I can remember, we father coached at Union College, a small liberal arts college in upstate New York. we had a chance to live in some college-owned housing for the first handful of years we lived in the area, and I can recall it was on a corner and just up from campus. I mean, you can't ask for like a better, so honestly, a better upbringing. It was like constant wiffle ball, constant hoops. But anyway, we lived on this corner in this yellow house just up from campus. It had a big old garage in the back, but it had this wraparound driveway. And one driveway, it had a hill. And, listen, if we missed the shot off the basket, it's a good chance the ball was rolling down into a pretty busy street, right? So Pops strung up a batting cage net across a line, so that way from tree to tree there were two trees kind of on either side of the top of that part of the driveway. And so it was great, like never had to worry about the ball rolling down the hill, unless of course we didn't drag the net across. But the other thing was that we had two hoops. We had two hoops up on the garage. One, of course, at regulation height, and then one at a height that was appropriate for teaching somebody how to shoot the basketball properly. And can remember just being continuously reminded, like, we have to practice proper habits. And so that's one of the first big memories for me looking back. And there were many unique memories, but that's one in particular that still sticks in my mind today. So I'm going to pass it to you. I want you to tell me, like, what is something, right? So like, you're still early in your journey, right? In your basketball journey and the experiences that you've had, but like, what's one early basketball memory that you have?
I remember one of the very first times that we went to the gym at school, and we would lower the hoops down and we would just shoot tons of form shots, just like form shot after form shot after form shot. And one time when we went back, I would try to like chuck it up just on regulation hoop, and you would say, "Don't dare shoot on that regulation size hoop. You gotta wait. Let us lower the hoops down." And so we just kept shooting our form shots just over and over and over again. And I'm very grateful. I would say my shot's pretty good right now, and I would give you all the credit for that. But that's probably one of my earliest memories.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, listen, anytime someone says, "Hey, you get credit for that," I think anybody who's ever mastered anything, and I'm not saying you've done that yet. But I think anybody who is putting in the time, like, that's a skill, right? That's something that we talk quite a bit among the coaches that I get a chance to work with, and in the club team that we're a part of, and other coaches around the game. Like, listen, you have to build those habits. Those habits are lifelong habits. Those are not things that it's an hour's worth of work or 500 hours worth of work. You got to keep doing it. So if you're willing to put the time in, like, that's a credit to you as an athlete, right? And we talk all the time about those habits translating to other things you'll do in life. That ball's going to stop bouncing at some point. And so I think it's important to recognize that this is a multiple level learning experience. Talk to me about, like, why you play. Like, what is it, you're about to be a freshman in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You played a bunch of hoops to this point, but like, what is it that keeps you excited, right? Keeps you going back to the gym, keeps you wanting to put the time in and try to get better? What's the reason that you play?
I mean, obviously there are multiple reasons. I'm a very competitive person.
That's true. That's true. We don't want to play cards with this one.
Yeah.
She's probably gonna take all your money and then some, right?
But it's also a very unpredictable game. Like playing a game, there's peaks and valleys, and it's very unpredictable, which makes it really exciting. So that also motivates me to get in the gym more and to work at it more. But I think those two reasons are the main reasons I like to play.
Okay. So obviously we spend a bunch of time in the gym together.
Yeah.
You and me and your mom, and you get to spend time with with Pops when he's in town. But you also played for me for 3 years.
Yeah.
So what, oftentimes we talk, there are some challenges, I think, sometimes, and when you play for a parent, and obviously this was really early in your, so spring year, fifth grade year, sixth grade year, seventh grade year. And what is the hardest thing about playing for a parent?
I think it's okay. So I remember we would go to AU practice, and I would say like, "Hey, Dad, I have a question," but it's like, "Oh shoot, sorry, it's Coach." Like I have to remember like inside the lines, it's Coach. I address you, yes, Coach, no, Coach. And I feel like it was really hard for me to like flip that switch on, making sure that I'm calling you Coach like your coach. And then coming home and accidentally calling you coach at home when you're dad. So I feel like making sure that I'm kind of understanding the situation that I'm in. I think that was the hardest part for me. But yeah, I mean, it was fun playing for you. Um, for the most part. For the
Okay.
most part.
Okay. It wasn't always perfect.
No.
Right? I think we talked about it early on when I had the opportunity to take on that team your first season, and we were still growing that team. We tried to talk about those boundaries, right? Separating one from the other. It's kind of hard at times.
Yeah.
I think today it's maybe at times a little easier because you have an opportunity to play for somebody else, both for school and for AAU. But we talked about that, right? Trying to separate. And then even today, when we sit down and watch film, it's really about just learning, right? Like, let's look at some decisions. Let's look at how you can get better. It's not easy as a parent either when you are playing that role. I had the opportunity to play one season for Pops in between a couple of opportunities that he had. And it was a great experience. I think I had a little inside track. I kind of knew what to expect from his approach to the game. But you want to make sure that you're setting expectations where the other players on the team also see the separation, and that's not always easy, not always perfect. So yeah. But we still get to work together, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about what, we spend a lot of time working on your game individually, trying to support you and helping you get better. Obviously, your sister is a little bit younger, so we're spending some time there. But what do you think, if you were passing along advice to another player who's working with their parent, right, as it relates to a coach player or coach teacher situation, what are some things that you think you might offer as advice or recommendations?
I know for me, I'm just grateful that I get to go to the gym with you almost every day, and you're sharing the knowledge of the game that you have with me. And the advice that I would give to another player is just be grateful that you have the opportunities with your parents. Going to the gym with you, they're willing to spend that time with you to get in the gym. So I say that's my biggest piece of advice.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think you handled it pretty well, and I think you continue to. It's fun. Obviously, it's something that I had an opportunity to spend time doing. Played all the way through high school and then on into college, and I think as a player, you have to just always look at feedback as not necessarily criticism, but as a chance to get better, right? And yeah, it's always going to be there's an additional layer of complexity or nuance or context when you're talking about a family relationship. But I think you got to have people in your life who are going to also be honest with you. I think you can count on that, right?
Yeah.
And there are oftentimes the three questions that we talk about, right? Like, what'd you do well, right? what could you have done a little bit better? And how can I help you? And I think when we approach it in that way, and that would be a recommendation really for any parent, right? So regardless of whether you have a relationship as a player and coach with your child, this opportunity to be the support, but also be the place that is going to be honest and direct. I think it can be tough to separate some of those things, but I think that has been our approach and it has worked well. So it's been fun to have those opportunities. I get to share that with your sister now. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
I think the jury is still out.
Oh,
whether,
yeah.
whether that's really working, but it's fun. I've had the opportunity now for 5 years to be involved in travel basketball and youth basketball, and coaching's not for the faint of heart, but you do it for those aha moments. At least that for me. That's why. How do you think about? I mean, you've been playing since you were pretty little, organized since like third grade.
Mm-hmm.
How have you? What are you? If you look at like at the beginning, when you started to where you are today, like how does the game look different to you? Like if you were to pick up on a couple of things, right? Like here are the couple of things that I see how the game can be complex or special, like compared to when you were little. Like what is it that you how do you feel that see the game differently now today than you did when you first started?
I mean, obviously, when I first started, it was very simple, like just dribble, just pass, okay. But I feel like now it's a lot more about like making sure that I think it's more about like making the right decisions. And I feel like there's a lot more team basketball, like sharing the ball, making sure that you're making the right decision for yourself, but also for your teammates. As a point guard, I feel like it's very hard to do that, but I feel like that's how the game has grown for me.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things that I know was always impressed on me growing up, and still to this day, right? Like we got to think about this as an evolution, right? As a constant journey. We were talking the other day, you and I, about it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
If we constantly look at your development in any player's development as a constant process, like how can I get better today? Then you're more likely to keep your frame of reference, your framing around the work, even on a tough day, in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's hard sometimes to do as a player. You're right? Like when you're little, you got a bunch of little heads bobbling up and down the court, right? And it's a win if we can get a shot at the basket. Although I might say even to this day with older kids, it's a win if you're getting a shot at the basket.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Team USA versus France, and they turned it over a bunch today in today's game.
Yeah.
Got that ball thrown around the court quite a bit. But yeah, it's been interesting to watch. You as a player, watch kids that we've known go from obviously youth basketball now to a place where like there's a decision on every catch, there's a decision on every drive. You're starting to learn some of the nuances and complexities of the game. It's interesting. I grew up in I think philosophically, even before where we are today, right? We think about like the Steph Currys of the world, but we think about like, look at the great Iowa team, the great South Carolina teams. We look at, what's happening in the WNBA, where spacing, we are in a period of time where teams that are really terrific at ball movement, player movement, oftentimes hit the high note. We look at the last, couple of NCAA champions, the last couple of WNBA championships. Those are teams who are assisting like 2 out of every 3 baskets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fun to watch players and teams when they finally get to a place where they're realizing like the game's easier for me when I cut hard, right? When I make the right pass, when I make the right decision on a closeout, and as a coach, I think we always have to position ourselves from a development first mentality, and so listen, you can't win them all, but we can learn from them all, and so I think that has been a couple of key things for me from a coaching perspective. Teach first, development first, decision first approach to helping players grow. But then also, listen, there's 5 of you on the floor on the offensive end. There's 5 of you on the floor on the defensive end. And so why don't we use all 5? Right. And so I think there's been a little bit of an increase in that level of conversation around the game. And it's been fun to watch the women's game on the global stage and see the level of skill and quality. I mean, obviously an incredible amount of talent, but watching that gold medal game today and thinking, man, there are a lot of professionals on that floor. They don't all play in the WNBA.
Yeah.
But it suggests that we've got to put a bigger microscope. We've got to get a bigger, more coverage of the women's game on the global stage, because there are a lot of players on that floor today that are pretty high caliber. So, all right, well, listen, let's jump into it then. Let's talk a little bit about today's game of the week. Gold medal game. I don't know if anybody thought it was going to come down to a point. Team USA loaded with talent. But France hung in there.
Yeah.
France really hung in there. So what were some of your initial observations? Like, what were some of the things as you're reflecting on the game? What were some of the things that really you thought were impactful?
I mean, France was just really digging at the U.S. team defensively. I think the U.S. ended up with 21 turnovers at the end of the game, and a lot of those were forced turnovers. And I think that France really hung in there. I was not expecting them to hold in there for as long as they did, but I thought that affected the game really majorly.
Yeah, France, I was impressed with, what I would refer to as like their defense at the point of attack.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point we kept talking about like, why are they making those entry passes, right? I mean, they were jamming up the ball. The wings were closed, right? There was all kinds of pressure on the wing as well. But France did a pretty incredible job of, at the point of attack, as the ball was being advanced. They even did a really good job as well. We talk about this all the time. Right? So in the state of North Carolina, we don't play with a shot clock.
Mm-hmm.
Your travel team, your AAU team, played with a shot clock in the U.S. Open qualifier, which was a unique experience for all of those players. But we don't play with a shot clock at the high school level. Obviously at the youth level, obviously at the college and professional level, there's a shot clock. And we talk all the time about, or what I thought France did a really good job of as well, was on made baskets, dead balls. They oftentimes would bring some pressure.
Yeah.
Not always pressure to necessarily turn them over, but pressure to get into that shot clock. 24-second shot clock. Next thing you know, they're running offense with like 14 seconds.
Yeah.
And I thought France's approach in doing that, it sort of ensured that the Team USA would really look for more individual, more isolation opportunities, and they struggled early.
They did.
The other two things I thought that France did defensively that created some challenges for the U.S. early. France has got some pretty good length. They put a lot of pressure on post feeds. Nothing came easy early for Asia Wilson. But I just thought their defensive game plan, I think I said to you at one point, we were talking about it, we were all sitting here watching the game. I was a little concerned that France's defensive pressure was going to eventually get into their offensive execution.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're they really bottled up Team USA and created a lot of challenges for them at the point of attack. But what are some other thoughts that you had about the game on either side?
I thought that Team USA did a great job getting to the free throw line. Obviously, France's defense put them at a disadvantage fouling wise. A lot of their players got into foul trouble early. But Team USA did a great job getting to the free throw line. I think they did end up with 22 points from the free throw line, whereas France only had 11. So I thought that really helped the U.S. Get some momentum when they were struggling a bit offensively.
What did you think about Team USA's rotations? I mean, listen, you got to acknowledge how hard it is, right? Where you're basically building a team with
Yeah.
a bunch of incredibly talented players, right? So you're looking down the bench or you're thinking about your matchups, and it's not easy.
Yeah,
Right? You got a lot of, first team all WNBA. Listen, you arguably have probably one of the two or three, maybe by the time their career ends, could be two or three of the greatest ever.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if we think about Diana Taurasi, even going back to her college years, right? I mean, she's pretty big time.
Yeah.
You could argue that she's the GOAT, along with the Breanna Stewart and Brittany Griner and Asia Wilson and Kelsey Plum, right? So the team is loaded. But what were your thoughts early on about Team USA's rotations and kind of how they were approaching the game versus adjustments that they made later on?
I do think they were focusing on more rotations. They had more rotations in the game where they were looking to push the ball, which I don't necessarily know if that was their strength in some of the groups of five that were on the floor. But I do think that they were struggling at the point position, looking to pitch ahead, maybe smarter decisions entering the ball. I mean, Sabrina Ionescu, she got in the game when?
Yeah, she came in like in the third quarter.
Yeah.
Maybe midway through the third quarter, if I have my times right. I thought for her, listen, you can watch her play during the season, and she's a 20 and 10 assists, 15 and 10 assists easy on most nights. Obviously, the Liberty, they have a pretty talented roster.
Yeah.
But, we're not really in an era of a lot of pass-first point guards, but she can play that role. I thought she came in and just helped them improve their ball movement, player movement. I thought she made the next pass. She had a couple of scoring passes in the half court to Napheesa Collier. Was able to sort of, I think, settle down. Your point earlier about, they turned it over quite a bit in the first half. At times, probably just being a little over aggressive.
Yeah.
Trying to create opportunities where there really weren't any opportunities, and maybe their guard combinations weren't exactly the right mix. But I did think that she brought some just sort of a calming effect. To them, is for sure on the offensive end, and contributed as well on the defensive end in that role. And they did find, again, sort of a combination. They went on a run there late in the third quarter.
Yeah,
and I think I said to you, man, if this game gets to 2 to 3 or 4 possessions with the U.S. leading at the end of the third, I think
it'll be 20.
The game, it'll be too much, right? It'll be too much for France. To France's credit, they kind of took that punch, and responded and kept it within a possession at the end of the third. And then again, as you saw, they U.S. kind of kept coming, but France had a response for a lot of those possessions. Again, I think a lot of that focus on their defensive pressure ultimately affected them on the offensive end, and ended up to US's benefit, which is great. Another gold medal. So let's talk about fourth quarter a little bit, right? Any thoughts on the fourth quarter and anything that you thought the U.S. did particularly well, or what stood out to you in the fourth quarter as the game was coming to a close down the stretch?
Um, there was, I don't remember how much time there was left on the clock, but France had the ball and they were either about to turn it over, they weren't going to score. And the US ended up fouling France and putting them at the free throw line. I don't know if that was planned or if that was like just accidentally
It
fouled
was a
or
4-point lead
yeah.
at that point, right?
Mhm.
And I think France had the ball maybe with like 17 seconds
Yeah,
around that. And they're eating into the clock. I think they fouled with about 13 seconds to go.
Yes.
And again, I don't know. I think we're going to talk about another possession, after the fact here in a second about that shot that Gabby Williams ends up hitting. Her feet were on the line,
Yeah.
so they're lucky. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I agree with you. Again, was it planned? I don't know. I probably wouldn't have given. You're up 4 with less than a shot clock left.
Yeah.
17, 18 seconds when the ball's being brought up the floor. I think you can afford to play the possession out and see what happens. So they give a foul now. France is going to the line, and they get to score 2 with
No time.
going
Yeah.
off the clock.
No time coming off.
Right, so you're kind of extending the game unintentionally. Listen, big stage,
Yeah.
gold medal game. You're playing a gold medal game on a home court, basically, for the French team.
Yeah.
So, not always easy to execute. France did not. I mean, I think they had 3 or 4 possessions where it was basically a basket difference, and they really couldn't get anything going. So, but yeah, not sure ideally you want to put them in that position where you're putting them at the line, getting to score points, because now you got to inbound against that defense.
Yeah.
You can foul quickly. You'd rather take your chances on making 1 and 2 and whatnot. But no, that's a good point. That brings me up again. Brings up the other possession that I thought.
Yeah.
So it's now a 3-point game,
Yeah.
right? Because they missed 3
No,
points.
no, it was 4-point because remember.
Wasn't it? Because Gabby Williams
came
feet
down
were on the line.
Oh yeah, yeah.
When she made it. She made it off the backboard.
Mm-hmm.
So 3-point game, less than 4 seconds, ball gets inbounded. So question to you: do you foul or do you let them shoot it? You're the coach of Team USA.
Oh.
You're up 3 with less than 4 seconds. Do you let them get it in, dribble it up a little bit, and then try to give a foul and put them on the line so they don't have a shot at the 3 to tie the game?
I think you let them try to advance the ball. If you see they have either a clear advantage, maybe you foul.
But it's 4
It's
seconds.
just-
How perfect can you be in your decision making at that time?
I mean, the U.S. did luck out. If she was 1 inch behind, one inch, that's an overtime game.
It's a tie game. Yeah, this is the question that gets asked a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Late game situations, the other team's in the bonus. A 3 ties it. Do you foul? Put them on the line? Do you not? There's a lot of things that could happen, right? You could put them on the line. They could make the first, miss the second, get a tip in. They could make the first, miss the second, kick it out, get a game winner. So, I'd have to look at what the data says, but I think I'm giving a foul.
I think I agree with you on that, but I would wait.
We're picking them up we're gonna foul them right about half court, just
Yeah.
inside of half court.
Okay. I would foul them.
Okay, all right,
Because fouling in the backcourt, what are they going to do in the backcourt?
it's true.
They don't have any advantage.
All right, so who was your player of the game? If you had to pick a player of the game for Team USA, who are you coming up with for player of the game?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I'm gonna have to think about that.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear. From my
Asia
perspective,
Wilson.
It's got to be Asia
It's got to be
Wilson.
Asia Wilson.
I mean, I think, listen, Kalia Copper had some big moments, got him some big buckets.
She did.
She was able to, several possessions kind of get going downhill, a couple of transition buckets. Asia Wilson took every one of France's toughest shots.
Yeah.
Right? Like they really made things difficult for her early. You could tell the energy in the game was kind of at a different level, right? Remember, even in the first half, she was on the front rim on a couple of free throws. Like she's a pretty good free throw shooter.
Yeah.
So it's a different level of game. It's got different stakes for sure. But I think ultimately, from beginning to end, she probably had the most impact on the game, with some other players kind of stepping in at different times and giving them a boost here and there. Kelsey Plum had a couple of threes at a couple of key times. We talked earlier about, obviously, Sabrina Ionescu kind of was a little bit of a settling force in the back half of the second half, which is something that they probably needed at that time. But pretty exciting times. I'm sure, in the next day or two, the real media, not us, but the real media, there could be questions. Is the roster composition right? Should we have taken other players? I mean, listen, roster's pretty loaded, and at the end of the day, they got it done, right? So, an exciting game, maybe a little too exciting for us U.S. fans, but certainly want to be able to see games that are like that, competitive on the big stage. And when you think about how the WNBA is preparing for expansion, adding a couple of teams, it's exciting to see. All right, so any final thoughts on today's game? Anything you want to add in before we look to close out our very first full podcast for Keys to the Gym? Nothing? Folks, she's literally sitting across from me, just shaking her head like, okay, Dad, you're crazy. It's time to wrap this thing up.
No.
But we're excited to have had this time with you. As we go forward, we're going to go ahead and we will put some poll engagements out on our podcast page, so you'll be able to submit some questions, give feedback. But folks, we just had the gold medal game, and the WNBA comes back this week. So we will be dropping a note about what this week's game of the week is going to be as we now come back and watch the WNBA play the kind of last third of their schedule. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week, along with a couple of other development opportunities, talking about what it means to prepare yourself for like your high school season, right? Your very first, well, actually your second high school season, but what are be some things we want to encourage other young players to be thinking about as they make this transition into high school and getting ready for competing at that level is one of the other topics that we're going to talk about. So when we come back with you next week, the WNBA returns and what's required to make that transition into a high school career. So with that, folks, we're gonna call it a session and send you all back to the Heartland. We'll see you in a week. Thanks so much.
Our legacy will never shake. Keys to the gym, unlocking our hearts. 3 generations tearing courts apart. More than a game, it's in our blood. Keys to the gym, our family's love. Sisters cross over, brothers slam. Mom's free throws win another jam. Switch up the net, our victory song. On these courts is where we belong. Keys to the gym, unlocking our hearts. 3 generations tearing courts apart. More than a game, it's in our blood. Keys to the gym, our family's love. Our family's love. Late night practices, early morning drills, chasing dreams, paying bills. Through thick and thin we persevere. Our passion for the game is clear. Late night practices, early morning drills, chasing dreams, paying bills. Through thick and thin we persevere. Our passion for the game is clear. From driveway hoops to center court, we've lived and breathed this treasured sport.